Well, let's bring in our political strategist to join us each Monday afternoon. Bruce Hawker from Campaign and Communications, Grahame Morris from Barton Deakin. Grahame, let's start with South Australia. Before we get to what it all means, who do you think is going to be most likely to form government?
Look, I don't know. It clearly will be up to the independents. I know Dr. Such. In fact, I ran the election campaign the second time he got elected, where he became a minister. Hey, he's a good bloke. I don't know Mr. Brock, but I know his electorate, Frome, and it's a very, very conservative electorate. Look, Bruce Hawker and I were tied up with talking to the independents when Julia Gillard needed independence. And if they were asking my advice, it would be, look, don't overthink this. You know, did the electorate want to change? Well, yes, sort of. Who got the most votes? Well, the Libs. What would your two electorates want? I don't think they'd want another 4 years of Labor. And I suspect, none of my business, but the independents are quite entitled to ask both sides of politics for something extra for their electorate. Yeah. And I'm sure they will.
Or indeed a ministerial portfolio.
Or a what?
A ministerial portfolio.
Or both. Or both. And they're quite entitled to. They are going to have enormous power. I just cannot see how either side gets that extra couple of seats to govern in their own right. So the independents are going to be all powerful. And you know, I still think, and I got a lot of best mates who were tied up looking at that last redistribution in South Australia. You know, it's a disgrace. You cannot have elections where parties get 52% and 53% and don't win.
So why didn't the Liberals make an issue of that at the time and during the election campaign? Why complain about it after the event?
No. There was real complaint at the time. At the time of the redistribution. But you put in your objections, you say this is what you should have, but it's still up to the independent person, and he's saying, oh no, it's about equal. It was never equal.
What's the answer to this then? What's the answer?
Hey?
Sack the independent body and get someone else to do it?
No. It is to come up with fair income boundaries.
But that's why you have an independent body do it.
Yeah, but they got it wrong.
So what's the answer? What are you saying?
They've got it wrong a couple of times.
You should get rid of them and sack them and put new people in?
Well, maybe that's right. Maybe get rid of them, start again with a proper redistribution, which they're entitled to do after each election.
Bruce,
get the damn thing right.
Back to the question of who's most likely to form government. What do you reckon, based on what you know of these independents and the way the seats are going, bearing in mind there's still quite a lot of postals and pre-polls to count?
Well, Bob Such, of course, was a Speaker in a Labor government under Mike Rann. So he's had no compunction about supporting the Labor Party in the past. Jeff Brock I'm not so sure about, but I think everything I hear about him is he's a very reasonable sort of a fellow. And I think he's going to be looking at what the major parties are going to be prepared to do for their region, and in particular his region. I think that's what will really drive people's thinking.
And of course, this argument that it's a Conservative electorate is disputed by those on the Labor side. There's a lot of working class in there. But look, it's a tough call for independents, Bruce. And as Grahame points out, both of you worked with Tony Windsor, Rob Oakeshott, and the rest in that process. It will take a little while, but if we can step to the federal implications, it's pretty confused out of South Australia. It's pretty clear cut though out of Tasmania, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely no doubt in Tassie, and there never was any doubt about that election. I think the size was pretty much what I thought it would be. It looks like they're going to have 14 Liberals, 6 Labor, and whoever else makes up the rest in a parliament of 25. So that is, I think, the result of a number of things. One, a 16-year government. And, 16 years is always on the outer edges for any government. And two, the coalition they entered into with the Greens. I think it's just returning to the South Australian issue a little bit. It's easier to go into these coalitions when you're a first-term government than a second, third, fourth-term government. You tend to get a lot more support from the electorate. Mike Rann did, Peter Beattie did, Jeff Gallop did. These were all short-term minority governments which translated into long-term majority governments. So, look, these are really tough issues, and here we go again. But it's not unusual for independents to hold the balance of power in state parliaments. It's getting more usual, in fact. Yeah, at a state level.
Well, it's certainly more usual in Tasmania, but it won't be after this result. When you put the two states together, Graham, what do you think the federal lessons or implications are?
Well, look, I think the big lesson out of Tasmania is that you eat your Greens, you don't sleep with them. You know, this is another election where the Greens have disappeared up their own posterior. You know, they are in awful trouble everywhere around this country. People have had enough. And there's also a very good message for any opposition, and that is get a leader, stick with him or her, have a bit of a backbone, have some unity and have some focus. And Will Hodgman has been an absolute beauty.
Because I think, as he pointed out on election night, he is one of the world's longest-serving opposition leaders. He's been, this is the point, he's done it after sticking at it. Tony Abbott did it after sticking at the job.
Yeah, also remember, Will Hodgman did have a chance to be Premier last time, but refused to negotiate with sort of independents and Greens
in particular. Yeah, that's right.
I think that is very interesting and very relevant. I mean, by the way, Bob Carr was opposition leader for 7 years. Mike ran, I think, for 8 years. Yep. And they went on to be very successful premiers in their own right. So a long apprenticeship can actually help you.
And Barry O'Farrell, who'd been around in one form or another for a long, long time.
That's 16 years. So yeah. It's not all that unusual in state politics for that to happen. And, you know, I think another little bit of history, it was Jim Bacon, when he became Premier, and he was campaigning in 1998, and we worked on that campaign, had a policy clearly stated not to go into any agreement with the Greens because successive Liberal and Labor governments had done that before. And
so this result drives home that message for Labor. This drives it home, do you think, for Labor?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Labor's got to have a very clear agenda of its own, never go into coalitions with other parties, be prepared to work with them when the opportunity presents itself if necessary, but don't go into coalitions with them. You just lose your own identity. And that's terrible.
Well, maybe that's right, Bruce, but everywhere, and again on the weekend, you know, 33, 34, 35, 36% of the vote is all Labor's getting. How on earth could you ever govern again without the Greens anywhere around Australia?
Well, you can just demand their support. Otherwise, they go after your mob who want to eat Greens rather than work with them. That's the choice that Greens should be given.
Well, the answer for Labor is surely to lift their own primary vote.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to keep doing. You've got to keep working on that. But you know, the other point about this election in South Australia, by the way, is that the Liberals under Alexander Downer were completely outmanoeuvred and out-campaigned on the ground in the seats that counted. They got 80% majority. As one of the independents was saying there, in seats that didn't count, but they couldn't win the seats which required 2% swings. They didn't manage to do it in 2010, and they haven't managed to do it again in 2014.
Let me ask you, let's leave state politics. The Royal Commission's begun today into the Pink Bats debacle. Kevin Rudd, Peter Garrett, Mark Arbib will all be called to give evidence, and that's going to be quite a spectacle, as I said earlier. Legally, though, do they have much to fear, Graham, do you think, personally?
Well, look, I hope not. I'm slightly uncomfortable about this. I can understand a coroner having an inquiry into the deaths, and I can understand a bit of an inquiry into the process. A Royal Commission looking at the whole thing is an interesting development.
Over the top?
Having a look, almost one government sort of having a look at a previous government and bringing in individuals. They're but for the grace of God go all of us. I'd be very uncomfortable if there was legal action taken against parliamentarians who at the time thought they were doing their job. There were some stupid decisions, but that's not the point. Politicians often make stupid decisions, but they shouldn't end up in legal trouble because of it. And
the evidence we heard today, Bruce, from one of the senior public servants, the Deputy Head of the Environment Department, she was given 2 days to put this whole scheme together over the Australia Day weekend. Does that ring true to the Kevin Rudd management style,
She should have been given 3. No, very, very seriously, though. I'm sure that that was the initial proposal, and then there would have been a lot of work done after that. Look, I can only endorse what Graham said in that regard. There's been, I think, something like 7 reviews and 1, at least, coroner's inquiry into this matter already, and I think that says a lot about, the motivation behind behind this Royal Commission. It's been well and truly canvassed by various bodies over a number of years, and I think that's really what is telling in this.
On that point of agreement between Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris, we'll have to wrap things up. We are right out of time. Thank you both for joining us. We'll catch up again next week. Stay with us after the break. Back with more on PM Agenda.